And then the Germans came and provided a factor in the development of freedom, although it didn't necessarily seem so at the time, and that was feudalism. The German barons, Germanic barons, became the landowners in France and Germany and Central Europe, other places. And this is important. The nature of the feudal contract was that there were obligations on both sides. The barons had obligations towards the king, but the king equally had obligations towards the barons. In other words, he did not have absolute discretion in regard to these powerful men in his country. Now, the main factor, finally, is the division of Europe. I alluded to this in my talk yesterday. There's an immense literature on why was Europe different, and maybe a good place to start would be a book called "How the West Grew Rich" by Rosenberg and Birdsall. How the West Grew Rich. There's an Australian economic historian named E.L. Jones who wrote a book called The European Miracle, a kind of provocative title, and sometimes this whole literature is referred to as the literature of the European miracle. What was the miracle? Why was it in Europe that for the first time the human race was able to avoid the Malthusian trap, named after Malthus? That is, Malthus maintained if society gets richer, what's going to happen simply is that people are going to have more kids are going to survive, and then the per capita income is going to go down. Well, in Europe that did not happen, and it spectacularly did not happen. Why? Why did it start in Europe? And now, of course, through many parts of the world. So this is not ethnocentric in the sense that nobody else can do this. We're talking about how it happened, the history of it. And the main consideration was that Europe was divided. As a French author, Jean Bachelet, says, this was a great non-event of European history, that no empire was able to take over the continent, although the German Hohenstaufen emperors of the Holy Roman Empire tried it, but they were thwarted. The Italian city-states and the Pope stopped them, and then, of course, the Spanish kings tried it, but they were stopped. Napoleon tried it, Hitler tried it, but nobody was able to gain control of the whole continent until these bureaucrats in Brussels. So what you had was a division among different political units. So what that meant, for instance, was that if things got too bad in Cologne, a businessman, because it's always the people who have some money who, who was it? Willie Horton? No. Some bank robber was once asked, "Why do you rob banks?" And he said, "That's where the money is." Businessmen were the natural targets of predatory rulers. One interesting thing about this literature is that these authors are not libertarians or anything, but they constantly refer to the state as a predatory institution. The state, by its nature, will take as much as it can get away with. So what would happen as things developed in the Middle Ages? Let's say the Archbishop of Cologne was excessive in his taxation or regulations or whatever. Well, the businessman would leave Cologne, go down the Rhine, and go to Holland. Or if Holland was a problem, across the North Sea and go to England. because there were different jurisdictions. And one thing smart rulers learned was that if you make things reasonable, of course we want our money, but we want to maximize what we get. We don't want to lose a good tax base. So if we minimize our exactions, then it'll be to our benefit. Well, the story is a complicated one and a great one. It turned out, this is another distinction of European history, only in Europe did parliaments arise. That is, representatives of the tax-bearing classes. That's what they were originally. The king would have to come to the parliament and ask for an increase in taxes. The representatives of the people who pay taxes would have to decide whether to give it to him or not. Now, we know the English Parliament, but there were parliaments or diets or similar institutions throughout Western and Central Europe. In fact, older than the English Parliament was the Cortes of Castile and of Leon in Spain. So there were these parliaments to look out for the interests of the people. There were also decrees that, in one way or another, the rulers were forced to give. In the areas that afterwards became Belgium and Holland, there was a famous statement that each succeeding ruler had to agree to respect the laws that existed. The ruler was under the laws. The ruler was not the creator of the laws. And if he wanted more taxes, he had to go to the different diets that already existed in those areas. The most famous of these decrees is the Magna Carta, which bad King John was forced to sign. And you can read it, it's about 30 pages or something, and it's widely available. And here are some of the provisions. No scutage nor aid, basically taxes, shall be imposed on our kingdom unless by common council of our kingdom. And for the things that have to be done, the ransoming of the king, for instance, they shall not be levied more than a reasonable aid or tax. It's one of the provisions. This is the 13th century, so there's a lot of feudal law involved here. No constable or bailiff of ours shall take corn or other provisions from anyone without immediately tendering money therefor, unless he can have a postponement by permission of the seller. The king can't just send his people around and confiscate their goods. No sheriff or bailiff of ours shall take the horses or carts of any freeman. Again, the right of private property. It shall be lawful in the future for anyone to leave our kingdom and to return, safe and secure, by land and water, except for a short period of time in war on grounds of public policy. So, freedom of movement for merchants in and out of England. Nobody shall, no one shall be put on trial for capital offense except tried by a jury of his peers. And finally, it's stated, wherefore it is our will, and we firmly enjoin, that the English church be free, that the men in our kingdom have and hold all the aforesaid liberties, rights, and concessions for themselves and their heirs. An oath, moreover, has been taken, as well as on our part, as also the barons, to witness this,